The night I'm going to tell you about was August 14th. I want to be precise about that because precision is the only thing I have left that I trust. And because later, when I describe what the stairs did, you'll want to believe I was drunk or disoriented or that I'd been alone too long. I had been alone a long time. 63 days. But I was not confused. I was on the catwalks of Martin Peak Lookout at 11:40 at night. And I was watching my own staircase, and the staircase was wrong. Let me back up just far enough. Martin Peak is a 14 by 14 cab on a 41-foot steel tower in the Bitterroot Range, western Montana. The Forest Service staffs it from mid-June through September. It's one of the older active towers built in 1953, refurbished in 2008. And it sits at just under 8,000 feet on a bald granite summit with 360-degree visibility. On a clear day, you can see into Idaho. On a smoky day, you can't see the privy. The tower is accessed by a single staircase, 4 flights, steel stringers, open great treads, right-hand ascent, 3 landings. I had climbed those stairs at minimum twice a day for 2 months. I could do it in the dark. I could do it in wind so loud I couldn't hear my own boots on the grating. I knew how many steps there were. 57. I knew how the third landing's handrail had a weld seam that caught your glove if you gripped it wrong. I knew that the second flight had a tread near the top that rang at a slightly different pitch, like a cracked bell. The stairs went up to the right. That's what I need you to understand. Not sometimes, not usually. Structurally, permanently. The way poured concrete is permanent. The staircase was a right-hand helix. You put your left hand on the inner rail and your right hand on the outer rail, and you went up clockwise. And you had done so every single time. And so had every lookout before you since Eisenhower was president. At 11:40 on August 14th, I stepped out of the cab onto the catwalk to check a lightning detector I'd been worried about all day. The sensor sits on a mast at the northwest corner of the catwalk, and to reach it I had to walk around to that side. I had my headlamp on red mode, which I preferred at night because it didn't ruin my dark adaptation. I came around. I described what the stairs did. You'll want to believe I was drunk or disoriented or that I'd been alone too long. I had been alone a long time. 63 days. But I was not confused. I was on the catwalks of Martin Peak Lookout at 11:40 at night. And I was watching my own staircase, and the staircase was wrong. Let me back up just far enough. Martin Peak is a 14 by 14 cab on a 41-foot steel tower in the Bitterroot Range, western Montana. The Forest Service staffs it from mid-June through September. It's one of the older active towers built in 1953, refurbished in 2008. And it sits at just under 8,000 feet on a bald granite summit with 360-degree visibility. On a clear day, you can see into Idaho. On a smoky day, you can't see the privy. The tower is accessed by a single staircase, 4 flights, steel stringers, open great treads, right-hand ascent, 3 landings. I had climbed those stairs at minimum twice a day for 2 months. I could do it in the dark. I could do it in wind so loud I couldn't hear my own boots on the grating. I knew how many steps there were. 57. I knew how the third landing's handrail had a weld seam that caught your glove if you gripped it wrong. I knew that the second flight had a tread near the top that rang at a slightly different pitch, like a cracked bell. The stairs went up to the right. That's what I need you to understand. Not sometimes, not usually. Structurally, permanently. The way poured concrete is permanent. The staircase was a right-hand helix. You put your left hand on the inner rail and your right hand on the outer rail, and you went up clockwise. And you had done so every single time. and so had every lookout before you since Eisenhower was president. At 11:40 on August 14th, I stepped out of the cab onto the catwalk to check a lightning detector I'd been worried about all day. The sensor sits on a mast at the northwest corner of the catwalk, and to reach it I had to walk around to that side. I had my headlamp on red mode, which I preferred at night because it didn't ruin my dark adaptation. I came around the catwalk and glanced down at the stairs, the way you glance at your own driveway when you step out your front door, and the stairs went left. I don't mean a step was loose. I don't mean a shadow made them look different. The staircase descended from the catwalk to the left, counterclockwise, exactly as it would look in a mirror. Every tread, every stringer, every landing, every bolt, the correct structure in the wrong direction. I stood there for what felt like a very long time. Then I went to the lightning detector, checked it, noted that the reading was nominal, and went back inside the cab and sat in my chair, and did not go near the catwalk again until sunrise. At sunrise, the stairs were normal. I know what you want me to say next. You want me to say I radioed dispatch or called my district supervisor or wrote it up in the log. I didn't do any of those things. What I did was walk down the 57 right-hand ascending stairs in the morning light, inspect every flight, touch the weld seam on the third landing, listen to the cracked bell tread on the second flight, and confirm that nothing was physically different. Then I walked back up. I told myself it was a trick of the red light. I told myself I'd been tired. I told myself that in 2 months of solitude, one perceptual hiccup was not a sign of anything. The brain does strange things when it's been without conversation for a while. I'd read about that. I'd been warned about it during training. Don't let the mountain make you weird, was how my supervisor, Linda, had put it. I had laughed at the time. I did write it in the logbook. Not the official observation log, the personal one I kept in a moleskin on the shelf above my cot. I wrote, August 14th. Thought stairs looked reversed in red light. Check eyes, probably nothing. For 3 weeks, it was nothing. I did my job. I woke at dawn, swept the horizon with binoculars, recorded weather observations at the prescribed hours, identified and located smoke columns when they appeared, plotted them on the Osborne Firefinder, radioed coordinates to dispatch, and maintained the cab and the equipment. It was a good season. I liked the work. The solitude was difficult but not unbearable, and I had developed a routine that kept me grounded. Morning stretches, noon meal cooked on the propane stove, afternoon reading, evening observations. I went to bed early because there was nothing to do after dark. That's an important detail. There was nothing to do after dark. You don't spot fires at night, or rather, you do if there's an active fire with visible flame. But generally you are not expected to be on the catwalk scanning the horizon at midnight. After September, the fire danger drops and the tower closes. The point is, I had no professional reason to be on the catwalk at night, and after August 14th, I had a private reason not to be. So I stayed inside. September 4th. I woke at 2:15 in the morning because a thunderstorm had moved in, and the lightning was close enough to feel not just see, but feel that whole body hum the air gets when discharge is nearby. I needed to check the lightning detector readings because a direct strike on the mast would require me to verify that my radio and electronics were still functional. Standard procedure. I put on my boots and my headlamp, and I opened the cab door. The stairs went left. This time I looked longer. I braced my hands on the catwalk rail, and I leaned over and I looked down all 4 flights. Lightning was strobing the sky every few seconds, so I didn't need my headlamp. The light was cold and stuttering, and it showed me every detail. The staircase was structurally perfect. The weld seam was on the correct landing. The cracked bell tread was in the correct position relative to the other treads. Everything was right except the direction. Left-hand descent, counterclockwise, a mirror. I went back inside and sat on my cot. The lightning detector could wait. I pressed my palms against my face, and I breathed. And I asked myself, calmly, whether I was experiencing a psychological episode. I had no family history of psychosis. I was not taking medication. I had not been drinking. There was no alcohol on the tower. I had been sleeping reasonably well. I was eating. I had had a radio conversation with Linda just that afternoon about a smoke in the Sapphire Range, and she had not noted anything unusual about my speech or behavior. I decided to test it. I set an alarm for 3:30. If the stairs were still reversed at 3:30, I would know it wasn't a momentary hallucination. If they were normal, I would call it a stress response and move on. At 3:30, I opened the door. The storm had passed east. The sky was clearing. I turned on my headlamp, white this time, full brightness, and I pointed it at the staircase. Left. At 4:50, I checked again. The eastern sky had that faint gray that comes before any color. Right. The stairs were correct. I watched the horizon lighten. I watched the first direct sunlight hit the summit rocks below the tower. I walked down the correct stairs and inspected them. And they were the same stairs they had always been. I walked back up. This time, I wrote more in the moleskin. I wrote the times. I wrote the weather. I wrote what I had seen. I wrote, "It is not the light." The white headlamp showed the same thing. It is not fatigue. I set a deliberate alarm and waited 90 minutes. It was consistent. It changed back before dawn. I do not understand this. And then below that, I wrote something I didn't plan to write. I wrote, "I have not gone down the stairs at night." That's when I realized the thing that actually scared me. Not the reversal. The reversal was impossible, and I couldn't explain it. But it was, in a way, a visual problem, a perception problem. The thing that scared me was the question of what it would mean to walk down. Because if I descended a staircase that went left instead of right, a staircase that could not physically exist in that configuration without being disassembled and rebuilt, where would I end up? At the bottom, obviously. The same rocky summit, the same privy, the same woodshed, the same trail leading down through the scree to the ridgeline and eventually to the trailhead 8 miles below. Obviously, I didn't test it. Let me describe my days for a while, because the days mattered. The days were completely normal. I spotted 2 more smokes in the first week of September. I repaired a shutter hinge. I recorded wind speeds that matched the forecast within reasonable tolerance. I had radio check-ins with dispatch every morning and evening. I spoke with Linda on the phone twice about end-of-season logistics. The world was ordinary, and my job was ordinary. And the stairs were ordinary, every single day. It was only after dark. I started checking. I don't mean I checked once and stopped. I mean, I began a systematic record. Every night, starting September 5th, I would set alarms at intervals and open the cab door and look at the stairs. I logged the time, the lighting conditions, the direction of the stairs, and any other observations. I did this for 11 consecutive nights. Here's what I found. The stairs were always normal at sunset. They were always normal at full dark if I checked before approximately 10:30 p.m. Somewhere between 10:30 and midnight, I could never catch the exact moment they reversed. They remained reversed through the night. Somewhere between 4:30 and first light, they reversed back. I could never catch that transition either. It wasn't that I fell asleep or looked away. Twice I sat on the catwalk in my sleeping bag and stared at the stairs continuously for 45 minutes, bracketing the time window when they should have changed. Both times, I realized at some point that they were different. But I could not identify the moment. It was like trying to watch the hour hand of a clock move. You know it moves. You cannot see it move. The weather didn't matter. It happened in clear skies, in cloud cover, in rain, in wind, in dead calm. The moon phase didn't matter. I checked. The temperature didn't correlate. I tried leaving my headlamp pointed at the stairs all night from the cab window. And in the morning, it was off. And I did not remember turning it off. And the batteries were not dead. I tried something else. On September 9th, during the day, I tied a piece of orange surveyor's tape to the right side handrail, at the top of the stairs, the outer rail, the one your right hand touches during the normal daytime ascent. At 11 p.m., I opened the door, and the stairs went left, and the surveyor's tape was on the left side. It had moved with the stairs, or the stairs had moved with it. In the morning, the tape was on the right again, where I had tied it. On September 11th, I tried a different test. I duct-taped my phone to the catwalk rail, set to record video overnight, pointed at the top of the staircase. In the morning, the phone was still there. The battery was dead. When I charged it and checked the footage, the recording was 4 hours and 11 minutes long. The first hour showed the stairs in their normal orientation, dimly visible in ambient starlight. Then the screen went fully black for approximately 2 hours, not dark black, as if the lens had been covered. Then the image returned, still dark but with visible starlight, and the stairs were normal. I never saw the reversal. The camera recorded darkness during the window when I knew, from my own eyes that same night, that the stairs were reversed. I sat with that footage for a long time. Here is what I did not do. I did not radio dispatch. I did not call Linda. I did not hike out. And I need to explain why, because it would be easy to say I was irrational or that the isolation had gotten to me. The truth is simpler and more embarrassing. I didn't report it because I could not think of what to say. The stairs reverse at night is not a maintenance issue. I can see it, but my camera can't. It is not a statement that keeps you employed. I had worked for the Forest Service for 4 seasons. I wanted to work for them again. And I was aware, very specifically aware, that lookouts who report psychological symptoms mid-season are not quietly reassured and left in place. They are evacuated, and they are evaluated, and they do not come back. So I stopped checking. For 5 nights, I stayed in my cot after dark, and I did not open the door, and I did not set alarms. I told myself that an anomaly I couldn't explain and couldn't record was not my professional responsibility. I told myself the stairs were the stairs during every hour I was required to use them, and that was enough. On September 16th, my friend Cal hiked up. Cal Reuter was a trail crew lead who had been working in the district all summer. We'd become friends over the radio. He had a dry sense of humor and a deep knowledge of the Bitterroot that I admired. He'd mentioned several times that he wanted to visit the tower before the season ended, and mid-September was his window. He arrived around 2 p.m. with a pack full of beer and salami and the kind of energy that only a person who has been around other people all summer can sustain. I was so glad to see him that I didn't think about the stairs for hours. We sat in the cab and ate and talked and watched the light change over the mountains. Cal was good company. He asked smart questions about the job and the equipment, and the Osborne and I showed him how to take a bearing on a smoke column. He told me about a bridge his crew had rebuilt on the Selway, and about a seasonal he'd been dating, and about his plans for the off-season. It was the most normal evening I'd had in months, Around 9 p.m., the sun was long down, and Cal asked if he could sleep on the catwalk. A lot of visitors prefer it. The cab is small, and a second person makes it cramped. And the catwalk on a clear night is extraordinary. The stars absurd and close. I said sure. I gave him a foam pad and a sleeping bag, and he sat up on the south side of the catwalk, the side farthest from the staircase. I lay in my cot. I lay there, and I listened to Cal moving around, settling in, his boots scuffing on the catwalk grating. I heard him unzip and rezip the sleeping bag. I heard him say, "Oh man," softly, which I knew meant he'd looked up and seen the Milky Way, because everyone says that. Then quiet. I did not sleep. I lay there, and I thought about the stairs, and I thought about whether Cal's presence would change anything. Then I thought about what it would mean if it didn't. At 11:15, I heard Cal get up. I heard his footsteps on the catwalk. He was going around toward the stairs. I thought he probably needed the privy. I heard him stop. A long pause. Then his footsteps came back around to the south side. He didn't go down. I heard him get back into the sleeping bag. He didn't say anything. In the morning, Cal was quiet. He packed up his gear and we had coffee, and he was polite, but he wasn't easy anymore. The humor was gone. He looked at the stairs once while we were standing on the catwalk in full daylight, normal stairs, right-hand ascent, and he looked away fast. We walked down together. At the bottom, he stopped and looked up at the tower. The whole thing from base to cab, and he said, "How long have you been up here?" I told him, 90-something days. By yourself? Yes. He nodded. He adjusted his pack straps. He said, "I got up to use the head last night. The stairs I couldn't figure out the stairs for a second. I was half asleep." He said this in a very deliberate tone, a tone that was asking me not to push. "Yeah," I said. "It's disorienting at night." That's what I figured. He hiked out. We didn't talk about it again. But he had seen it. That changed everything. It wasn't my perception. It wasn't isolation psychosis. It wasn't a trick of red light on steel. Cal Reuter, a healthy, sociable, well-adjusted man who had spent his summer around other people every single day, had walked to the staircase in the middle of the night, and he had turned around without going down. I went back up. 57 steps, right-hand ascent, every one of them solid and real in the afternoon sun. I sat in the chair, and I picked up the moleskin, and I wrote, "Cal saw it. He won't say so, but he saw it. I am not sick. The stairs change. I had 2 weeks left in the season. I want to describe what those 2 weeks felt like, because the experience of living with something impossible is not what you'd expect. It's not constant terror. It's not even constant unease. It's more like, when you learn a word, and then suddenly you hear it everywhere. It was like that, except the word was wrong. And the place I kept hearing it was my own home. During the day, the tower was the tower. Solid, ordinary, mine. I'd made it mine over the course of a summer. My books on the shelf, my coffee mug, my pencil marks on the Osborne map where I'd plotted smokes, the weld seam, the cracked bell tread, the way the afternoon light came through the west windows and hit the floor at an angle that moved perceptibly between June and September. I loved that tower. I need you to understand that. I loved the work and I loved the place. And every night, the place shifted just enough to tell me I was living on something's terms, not mine. I kept my door closed at night. I stopped checking. But I knew. I'd lie in my cot and I'd feel the moment Not see it, not hear it, feel it, somewhere in my inner ear or my chest when the stairs changed. And I'd feel it again before dawn when they changed back. It was like living above a tide. On September 22nd, Linda radioed to confirm my pack-out date. September 30th. A mule team would come up to carry the heavy equipment and I'd hike down. Standard end of season. She asked how I was doing and I said fine. She asked if the tower was in good shape and I said yes. She asked if there was anything to note for the end-of-season report, and I said the lightning detector had been intermittent in August, but had stabilized. I almost said something. I had the radio in my hand, and Linda's voice was warm and professional. And I could have said, "Linda, I need to ask you something about the tower." I could have said, "Has anyone ever mentioned anything unusual about the stairs?" I could have said, "Can you check the records and tell me if any previous lookout ever filed a report about a structural anomaly at night?" I said, "Thanks, Linda. Looking forward to getting down." I packed out on September 30th. The mule team arrived at noon. 2 packers, both seasonal, both cheerful, both eager to get the job done and get home. We loaded the panniers, and I did my final walkthrough of the cab shutters latched, propane off, firefinder covered, log sealed. I stood in the middle of the 14 by 14 room for a moment. Then I walked down the stairs for the last time. 57 steps. Right-hand descent. Normal. I drove home to Missoula. I returned my radio and my keys. I filed my end-of-season paperwork. I signed the lookout closure form. Under structural issues/maintenance needs, I wrote, "Replace northwest shutter. Lightning detector mount may need reinforcement before next season." I did not mention the stairs. The off-season was long. I worked at a gear shop in town. I skied. I did normal things. But I thought about the stairs most days, and some nights I dreamed about them. And the dream was always the same. I was on the catwalk, and it was dark. And the stairs went left, and I walked down them. In the dream, the stairs didn't end at the ground. They kept going. Down through the rock, down through the mountain, landing after landing, the same steel stringers and open grate treads, and I never reached the bottom. I always woke up before I reached the bottom. In February, I called Cal. I hadn't spoken to him since the tower. We made small talk for 10 minutes, and then I asked him, directly, what he'd seen that night on Martin Peak. Long silence. "The stairs were backwards," he said, "like a mirror image. I thought I was dreaming, so I went back to bed." "You didn't go down?" "No." "Why not?" Another silence. Then, "Because they didn't go to the ground." I felt something drop inside my chest. "What do you mean?" I looked down. You know, I was going to go take a leak, so I looked over the rail to get my bearings. And the stairs went down, but the ground wasn't there. It was just they kept going, like looking down a stairwell in a tall building. Just more stairs, more landings. I couldn't see the bottom. He paused. In the morning, the ground was back, 41 feet like always. So I figured I'd been dreaming. "You weren't dreaming, Cal." "I know." He asked me not to call him about it again. I said, "Okay, I haven't." But here's what stayed with me about what Cal said. He had seen something I hadn't. I had never looked down past the first landing. I had confirmed the reversal, logged it, tested it, videoed it. I had established that it was real, that it was consistent, that it evaded recording. But I had never actually leaned over the railing and looked at where the stairs went. Cal had done that in the first 30 seconds, because he was just a guy who needed to pee. And he had seen that the stairs did not terminate at the summit rock. I applied for Martin Peak again for the following season. I need you to understand this decision correctly. I was not being brave. I was not being reckless. I was being, I don't know the right word, responsible. I knew about the tower now. If someone else staffed it, they would encounter the same thing. Alone, without any warning, without any context. Or they wouldn't, maybe it wouldn't happen to someone else. But I couldn't know that. And the idea of a 22-year-old first-season lookout lying in that cab at midnight, hearing the shift, opening the door, and deciding to walk down a staircase that didn't end. That idea was worse than going back myself. I got the assignment. Same tower, same season, same start date in mid-June. On my first night back, I sat on the catwalk and I waited. At 11:08, the earliest I'd ever observed the change, the stairs went left. I leaned over the rail with my headlamp on full white and I looked down. Cal was right. The stairs descended correctly, flight, landing, flight, landing, but they did not end at the ground. Below where the fourth landing should have connected to the summit rock, there was a fifth flight, and below that, a sixth. The structure was identical, same steel, same grating, same rail profile, but it continued into a darkness that my headlamp could not reach. The beam hit the grating, and the stringers and the rails, and then, maybe 60 or 70 feet below the catwalk, the light just stopped reaching. Not because there was a floor, because the stairs kept going beyond the throw of the light. I pulled back. I sat on the catwalk with my back against the cab wall, and I breathed, and I looked at the stars, and I waited for dawn. At some point before first light, I felt the shift. I looked at the stairs, right hand, 4 flights. The ground at the bottom, solid granite, exactly 41 feet down, 11 more weeks. I changed my approach. I stopped treating it as a problem to solve and started treating it as a condition of the environment. The tower had a staircase that did one thing during the day and another thing at night. The way the mountain had weather that did one thing in the morning and another thing in the afternoon. I did my job. I spotted fires. I recorded observations. I maintained equipment. At night I stayed in the cab. But I listened. This was new. And I want to be careful about how I describe it, because it was subtle enough that I'm still not fully certain it was real. Starting in mid-July of that second season, on quiet nights, no wind, no thunder, no radio chatter, I began to hear something from the stairs. Not footsteps, not voices, a resonance, like the sound a long metal structure makes when temperature changes cause it to expand or contract, except this sound had a rhythm. Not a regular rhythm, not mechanical, more like breathing. A long, slow expansion of sound. Then a pause, then a contraction. The cracked bell tread was part of it. On those quiet nights, that one tread would ring faintly, at unpredictable intervals, as if something were stepping on it, very carefully, testing its weight, and then stopping. I did not go outside to investigate. On August 1st, I made a decision that I'd been circling for weeks. I decided to go down the stairs at night. I want to explain my reasoning, because I don't want you to think I'd simply lost my mind. I was a second-year lookout on a tower with an anomaly I had thoroughly documented. The anomaly was consistent. It was predictable. It was not aggressive. Nothing had come up the stairs. Nothing had threatened me. Nothing had so much as rattled the cab door. The reversed staircase simply existed, like a geological feature. And it extended downward, past the point where the ground should have been. I wanted to know how far it went. I wanted to know what was at the bottom. I wanted to know whether the staircase was the anomaly, or whether the anomaly was what the staircase connected to. I prepared. I put on my boots, my hard hat, my headlamp. I carried a handheld radio set to the district repeater frequency, though I had no intention of transmitting. I brought 100-foot length of paracord, one end tied to the catwalk rail, the rest coiled in my pack. I brought a handful of chem lights. I brought water and a granola bar, because I didn't know how long I'd be gone. And I was thinking about this the way I'd think about a short hike into unfamiliar terrain. Be prepared. Tell someone where you're going. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. At 11:20, the stairs were reversed. I confirmed it. I leaned over and confirmed that they extended past the ground. I dropped a chem light. It fell, bouncing off the grating, landing after landing, a green glow getting smaller and smaller. I counted the landings by watching the light bounce. It passed 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At the 9th landing, the light stopped moving, as if it had settled on a flat surface. I could see it a faint green point very far below. I put my left hand on the outer rail, what would normally be the inner rail in daylight, and I started down. The first 4 flights were structurally identical to the daytime stairs. Same treads, same sound under my boots. The cracked bell tread rang at its usual pitch. The weld seam on the 3rd landing caught my glove. At the bottom of the 4th flight, where the ground should have been, there was instead another landing. And the stairs continued. I want to describe what the air felt like. It was August in Montana. At 8,000 feet, a night in August is cool 50s, maybe high 40s. As I descended past the 4th landing, the air did not get warmer, as you'd expect if I were going underground. It got stiller. Not colder, not warmer. The temperature stayed the same, but the air stopped moving entirely. On the summit there is always wind, always some movement. Below the 4th landing, nothing. Perfect stillness. My headlamp beam was the only thing moving. 5th landing. 6th. The stairs were identical. Same grating, same steel. My paracord was paying out behind me. The chem light was brighter now, closer. 7th landing. 8th. The green glow was on the 9th landing, sitting on the grating where it had fallen. I picked it up. The 9th landing was wider than the others. Not by a lot, maybe an extra 3 feet in each direction. The stairs continued down from the far side, but the landing itself opened to the left, into a space I couldn't see. My headlamp showed the first few feet of a flat steel floor, same grating as the stairs, extending away from the landing into darkness. There was a railing along the left side. I stood there for a long time. The air was perfectly still. There was no sound at all. Not the resonance I'd heard from the cab, not the cracked bell ring, nothing. The silence had a quality I'd never experienced, not the silence of the mountain, which is full of small sounds, but a silence that seemed to have weight. I could feel it against my eardrums, like mild pressure. I turned left. I followed the railing. The steel floor extended straight for maybe 40 feet and then ended at a wall. Not a rock wall, a steel wall, riveted like a bulkhead. In the wall there was a door, a steel door with a lever handle, the kind you see on industrial buildings or ships. Above the door, bolted to the wall, there was a small metal plate with embossed letters. I had to get very close to read them. Martin Peak Lookout USDAFS Auxiliary Level. Below that, a second line, descend only during posted hours. Below that, a third line, smaller, in a different typeface, as if it had been added later. Do not descend after return of daylight stair. I read those words several times. I read them with the specific, disoriented attention of a person who is standing inside something that cannot exist and is looking at a sign that was installed by his own employer. The typeface on the first two lines was consistent with Forest Service signage from the mid-20th century. The third line looked newer. The bolts holding the plate to the wall were not rusted. I tried the lever handle. The door did not open. It was not locked. The handle moved freely, but the door itself did not move. It felt like pushing against a wall. There was no give, no flex in the frame. It simply would not open. I stood there for another minute. Then I turned around, and I walked back to the 9th landing, and I went up the stairs, all 9 flights. And I came out onto the catwalk of my tower on a clear August night in Montana. And I untied my paracord, and I went inside, and I closed the door, and I sat on my cot, and I pressed my hands against my face. Auxiliary level. The Forest Service had a sign down there. The Forest Service, or someone with access to Forest Service signage materials, and the ability to install a steel bulkhead at the bottom of a staircase that only exists at night inside a granite mountain, had labeled it. Had posted hours. Had warned against returning after the staircase reverted to its daytime configuration. I need to say what that third line implied, because I've thought about it for years, and I still feel it in my stomach. Do not descend after return of daylight stair. That means someone had done it. Someone had gone down the night stairs, and had still been below when dawn came and the stairs changed back. And that person had either come back and reported what happened, in which case the sign was a warning from experience, or they had not come back, in which case the sign was a warning from absence. I thought about what the daytime ground looked like from above. Solid granite. The base of the tower bolted into bedrock. No door, no stairwell, no gap. In the daytime, there was nothing below the 4th landing, but rock. Whatever was below me at night was sealed off by sunrise, or, more precisely, whatever was below me at night was not below me at all during the day. It was somewhere else. The night stairs connected to a place that had no spatial relationship to the summit of Martin Peak. I did not go down again. Not because I wasn't tempted, because the sign had answered my question. I had wanted to know whether the anomaly was random or managed. It was managed. Someone had built that bulkhead. Someone had bolted that sign to that wall. Someone had added the third line after the original installation, which meant the management had continued over time, which meant the Forest Service, or some part of it, knew. I finished my 2nd season. I packed out on October 1st. I filed my paperwork. Under structural issues/maintenance needs, I wrote, cracked bell tread on 2nd flight may need replacement. Lightning detector nominal all season. I did not mention the stairs. I did not mention the auxiliary level. I did not mention the sign. But I did something else. In November, after I'd been home for a month, I drove to the Bitterroot National Forest Supervisor's office in Hamilton, and I asked to see the original construction documents for Martin Peak Lookout. I said I was doing research for a historical article about fire towers, which was not entirely untrue. I'd considered writing one. The woman at the front desk, whose name was Patty, was perfectly helpful. She pulled the file. Martin Peak Lookout, built 1953, standard L4 cab on a 41-foot treated steel tower. General Services Administration specifications. The file contained the engineering drawings, the materials list, the construction log, and the inspection certifications. I went through everything. The engineering drawings showed 4 flights of stairs. Right-hand ascent, 57 treads, 3 landings, catwalk, cab, nothing else. But the materials list didn't match. The engineering drawings specified the steel required for 4 flights, 3 landings, and a catwalk. The materials list specified roughly 2.5 times that amount of structural steel. I'm not an engineer, but I could read the quantities. The drawings called for 31 stair treads, 57 total treads across 4 flights. But the material specs use a different unit count, and the materials list requisitioned 84. The drawings called for 4 stringer pairs. The list requisitioned 12. The drawings called for enough grading for the catwalk and the 3 landings. The list requisitioned enough for the catwalk, the landings, and approximately 2,200 additional square feet. 2,200 square feet of steel grading for a tower that needed maybe 150. Patty saw me frowning. Find something interesting? The materials list doesn't match the plans. She glanced at it. That happens. They often ordered surplus for remote sites because it was expensive to bring materials up a second time. Easier to have too much than too little. She was right. That was reasonable. That was the sort of explanation a reasonable person gives for a discrepancy in a 70-year-old construction file. And if I hadn't stood on the 9th landing and read that sign, I would have accepted it. I thanked her. I copied the pages I wanted. I left. Over the next 2 months, I visited 3 more Forest Service offices. I told the same story about the article. I requested construction records for every active lookout tower in the Bitterroot and Nez Perce Clearwater Forests, 11 towers total. I compared the materials lists to the engineering drawings. 9 of the 11 matched within expected tolerances. Minor surplus, easily explained. 2 did not. Martin Peak was one. The other was a tower called Sheephead Point in the Nez Perce, built in 1957. Sheephead's materials list specified almost 3 times the structural steel shown in its drawings. Same pattern. Extra treads, extra stringers, extra grading. I had never been to Sheephead Point. I had never spoken to anyone who had staffed it. I did something then that I've gone back and forth about ever since. I looked up the staffing history for Sheephead Point. This was harder. I had to file a FOIA request, and the response took 4 months. And what I received was heavily redacted in places, which I found unusual for a staffing roster of a fire lookout tower. But I got names. I went through 20 years of names, and I found one I could track down. A woman named Diane Keeley, who had staffed Sheephead in 1991 and 1992, and who was now retired and living in Grangeville, Idaho. I called her. I introduced myself as a lookout and told her I was writing about the history of fire towers. She was friendly. She told me about her seasons at Sheephead, the views, the storms, the solitude. She was generous with details, and I took notes, and it was a pleasant conversation. Then I asked, "Did you ever notice anything unusual about the stairs?" The line went quiet. I waited. "Which season are you at Martin?" she asked. I hadn't told her I was at Martin. "I just finished my second," I said. "Did you go down?" "To the 9th landing." "Then you saw the sign?" "Yes." Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Not frightened, tired. The voice of a person who has carried something for 30 years and has just been asked to pick it up again. "At Sheephead, it was the 12th landing," she said. The door opened. I couldn't speak. I was 24. I thought I was losing my mind for the first 3 weeks. Then I found the sign, and I thought, okay, this is something the Forest Service knows about. This is managed. There's probably an explanation. And the door was unlocked. So I went in. She paused. "There's a room. It's not large. Steel walls, steel floor like a utility room on a ship. There's a table and a chair and a logbook." A logbook. A green canvas cover logbook, like the ones we use in the cab. And it's full of entries, dates, times, observations. in different handwriting, going back decades. Observations of what? Of the auxiliary level. That's what the heading on the first page says. Auxiliary level observation log. People went down, and they wrote what they found. The door, the room, the table, the logbook. That's all there is. There's nothing else in the room. No other doors, no equipment, no windows. Just walls and a table and the logbook. What did the entries say? They said what I'm telling you. Someone found the stairs, went down, found the room, wrote about finding the room. Some of them wrote a lot. Some wrote a few lines. One person in 1974 measured the room and wrote the dimensions. 11 feet by 8 feet. Someone in 1969 tried to photograph it and wrote that the pictures came out black. Someone in 1982 wrote that she had spent 4 consecutive nights in the room, and that nothing happened, and that the air never moved, and the silence never changed. Did you write in it? Yes, my name and the date and what I saw, that's all. Diane. The sign on my door said to not descend after the daylight stare returns. My door wouldn't open. Mine opened. I don't know why yours didn't. Maybe it's a different, I don't know what to call it. A different arrangement. I asked her if she'd ever reported it. She said no. I asked her why. She said, because the sign was already there. They already know. Whatever it is, it was built that way. The extra steel is on the materials list. Somebody ordered those treads and those stringers and that grating in 1957 and sent them up a mountain and built a staircase that only exists 12 hours a day. That wasn't an accident. That was a decision. She asked me not to contact her again. She was kind about it. She said, I spent 30 years not thinking about this. I'm not going to start again. I said I understood. I didn't go back for a 3rd season. I told Linda I was taking a year off. She didn't push. I think she assumed it was burnout. 2 full seasons on a remote tower is a lot. I got a job teaching avalanche safety courses in the winter and working trail crew in the summer. Both in the Bitterroot, both far from any lookout tower. But I kept the moleskin. And I kept the copied construction documents. And I kept Diane's story. And over the next few years, during winters, I did quiet research. Not obsessive research, careful research. I visited archives. I read old Forest Service administrative histories. I looked for anything that mentioned auxiliary construction or subgrade infrastructure at lookout sites or supplementary materials orders for tower projects. I found almost nothing. The phrase auxiliary level does not appear in any Forest Service publication I've been able to locate. There is no construction standard for subgrade infrastructure at lookout towers. There is no maintenance protocol. There is no mention, in any document I've found, of stairs that descend below ground level at any tower site. But I found one thing. In the Forest History Society archive in Durham, North Carolina, there is a collection of personal papers donated by a man named Harold Fenn, who was a regional engineer for the Forest Service in Region 1, the Northern Region, which includes Montana and northern Idaho from 1947 to 1968. Harold Fenn supervised the construction of dozens of lookout towers, including, according to his project list, Martin Peak. His papers are mostly technical correspondence about materials, budgets, scheduling. But in a folder labeled MISC/Personal, there's a single sheet of typewritten text with no heading, no date, and no signature. It reads, in its entirety, the auxiliary construction at redacted and redacted sites proceeds according to the revised specification. Steel has been delivered. Crews report no unusual difficulty. I have reviewed the descending section at Redacted personally and confirm it matches the supplemental drawings, which are not to be filed with the primary engineering documents. The question of access hours remains unresolved. I recommend signage as discussed. I do not recommend disclosure to staffing personnel. I remain uncertain whether we are building something or whether we are finishing something that was already here. That last line is the one I carry. Harold Fenn, a government engineer who built fire lookout towers for a living, standing at some point in the 1950s at the top of a staircase that went further down than it should have, looking at work his own crews had done, and writing in his private notes, "I remain uncertain whether we are building something or whether we are finishing something that was already here." There are 57 lookout towers in Region 1 that were built or substantially reconstructed between 1947 and 1968, the years Fenn was active. I have obtained construction documents for 19 of them so far. Of those 19, 3 have materials lists that significantly exceed their engineering drawings. I have not visited those towers. I have not contacted their recent lookouts. I have not filed a FOIA for their staffing histories. I have not gone back to Martin Peak. But sometimes, in the middle of a winter night in my apartment in Missoula, I wake up and I stand at the top of my building's internal stairwell, 5 floors, concrete, fluorescent lit, perfectly ordinary, and I look down, and at the flights. They're always the correct number. There have always been the correct number. Except once, in January, at 3 a.m. The stairwell lights were off, and I turned on my phone flashlight and pointed it down, and I counted 6 flights in a 5-story building. I blinked. I counted again. 5. The correct number. I went back to bed. But here is the thing I think about. Harold Fenn wrote that he didn't know whether they were building something or finishing something. Diane Keeley found a logbook full of decades of entries in a room that contained nothing but the logbook. My staircase wouldn't let me through the door, and hers did, and neither of us knows why. The cameras can't see it. The phone can't record it. The reversal can't be caught in the act. But the sign is real. The steel is real. The materials list is real. Someone ordered that grating. Someone paid for it. Someone carried it up a mountain and bolted it into place. And someone wrote, "Do not descend after return of daylight stare," which means someone did descend after the return of the daylight stare. And the sign is there because of what happened to them. I don't know what's at the bottom. I don't know if there is a bottom. I know that there are at least 3 towers, and probably more, that were built with stairs that go somewhere else at night. I know the Forest Service, or some part of it, once was aware of this, and made a decision to manage it with signage and silence rather than investigation. I know that lookouts have been going down those stairs for decades, alone, and writing in logbooks that no one collects, in rooms that no one uses, at the bottom of structures that don't exist during business hours. I know that last October, I received a letter at my home address, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, photocopied, showing a handwritten log entry dated August 1st of my 2nd season the night I went down. The entry was in my handwriting, my name, my date. A physical description of the 9 flights, the 9th landing, the bulkhead, the sign, the locked door. Exactly what I had seen. Exactly what I'd written in my moleskin afterward. But I didn't write it in a logbook. I didn't reach a logbook. The door didn't open. I stood in front of it, and I read the sign, and I turned around, and I went back up. The entry exists in a book I never opened, in a room I never entered, on a level of a tower that is not there during the day. And it is in my handwriting. And it is accurate. And at the bottom of the entry, below my description, There is a single additional line in a hand I don't recognize. Confirmed. 9th landing. Door will open next season. I did not go back for a 3rd season. I'm telling you this so that you understand what I chose and what I didn't choose, and what may have already been chosen for me, in a room I have never been inside. The stairs on my apartment building are correct tonight. I just checked. It's 3 a.m. and they are correct, and I'm going back to bed. And in the morning, I will count them again, and they will still be correct. But the season starts in June, and the tower is already staffed. Someone is up there, right now. Not at Martin, I checked. Martin is vacant this year, unstaffed due to budget cuts, the first time in its history. But Sheephead is staffed, and the 3rd tower is staffed. And there are others I haven't identified yet. I could make calls. I could warn people. I could send copies of Fenn's memo and the construction documents and the photograph of my own logbook entry from a room I never entered. I could also do what Diane did, and what Harold Fenn did, and what every lookout who ever wrote in those logbooks did, which is nothing. Carry it quietly. Let the next person find the stairs on their own. Trust that the sign is enough. Martin Peak is unstaffed this year. No one is on the tower. No one is climbing the stairs. No one is opening the cab door at midnight. But the materials list says 84 treads were delivered to that summit in 1953, and only 57 of them are visible during the day, and the other 27 are somewhere, and the season hasn't started yet, and the budget was cut, and the tower is empty, and I keep thinking about what an empty tower means at night. Not who is at the top, who is at the bottom, and whether the door, with no one left to warn, is finally open.